While the US Supreme Court's ruling on against President Trump, use of tariffs marks a clear setback for his use of trade levies. As an economic weapon, analysts say that it offers little immediate relief for the global economy. Instead, they expect another bout of activity crimping confusion combined with near certainty that Trump will seek other means to replace the raft of global tariffs now struck down as unlawful. In the meantime, a long list of uncertainties remain, including what new tariffs Trump will seek to impose, whether the funds from the annulled taxes will have to be refunded, and whether territories that enter deals with the US to mitigate their impact will see those pacts reopened for review. Responding to the ruling, Trump announced that new global tariffs of 10% for an initial 150-day period and acknowledged that it was not clear if or when there would be any refunds. For those countries on higher US tariff levels, the change is more dramatic. For China, Brazil and India, it will mean double-digit percentage point cuts, albeit to still high levels. Yet, no one expects this to remain the status quo. The Trump administration has served notice long before the ruling that it can and will use other legal vehicles to reimpose tariffs. UK, meanwhile, expects its privileged trading position with the United States to continue. The government said on the Friday of the baseline of 10% tariff it agreed with US.
What are Donald Trump's options at the moment? The Supreme Court has struck down on those tariffs. You have Secretary Scott Bessent, other administrative officials that are saying that they will invoke other legal justifications to retain as many Trump tariffs as possible. And if not, will these tariffs now cease to exist?
Well, there are two things which could happen. One is that, the US imposes similar tariffs under Section 301 for unfair trade practices by other countries. As I said, there has to be an investigation under that. Secondly, it can impose it on national security grounds under 232. So there are instruments which the US has under which it can impose tariffs on its trade partners, but they will not be so broad-based. They will be more limited. Or Trump can go to the Congress and say, you pass the legislation to impose these tariffs, because tariff imposition and financial powers are actually with the Congress, not with the president. So if the Congress passes legislation, then the tariffs become legal. So he has a range of options. How much he will bring them into play and in what manner, I think we have to wait and see.
First up, in a major setback for Donald Trump, the US Supreme Court has ruled that the president cannot impose sweeping global tariffs with a stroke of a pen. Breaking developments on your screens. In a 6-3 verdict, the court struck down Donald Trump's tariffs that formed the centerpiece of Trump's economic and foreign policy strategy. Chief Justice John Roberts, he wrote that the president had claimed extraordinary power, quote unquote, to unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited scope, but failed to show clear authorization from the Congress party. Now, why does the ruling matter? The decision is the first major judicial pushback against Donald Trump's expansive view of presidential power on trade. An uphill battle for the president in the Congress as well. Donald Trump had counted on the tariffs to raise over $2 trillion for the federal budget over the next decade and to push manufacturing back to the United States. The administration had warned the court that striking down the tariffs could cause catastrophic consequences for the national security, for United States foreign policy, and for the country's economy. Now, just to look at what are Donald Trump's options, shall we? Despite the setback, the White House has signaled the tariff fight is far from finished. Officials say alternative legal routes are already being explored to preserve as many duties as possible. Businesses, meanwhile, are watching closely, needless to say, especially after thousands of companies filed claims seeking refunds on the tariffs that have already been paid, especially the small businesses. They want the refunds to come in thick and fast. Tariffs are import taxes paid by companies bringing goods into the United States, and the ruling could have major cost implications across various sectors. Even before the verdict, Donald Trump had hinted at a fallback option. After Supreme Court arguments in November, he said the administration would prepare a game 2, a plan B, if the ruling went against him. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed officials are examining alternate legal justifications, and these include, let's name a few, national security tariff provision. On the other hand, you've got the retaliatory tariffs against unfair trade practices, fresh determinations by the Office of the United States Trade Representative. But the big questions certainly continue to linger. The big questions: has the court clipped Donald Trump's tariff weapon? Or is a new trade battle about to begin as Donald Trump readies his plan B? Ambassador Jayant Dasgupta, former ambassador to the WTO, with us on the broadcast. Many thanks for taking out the time. Ambassador, how do you look at this crucial development, breaking development? Small businesses and big businesses alike glued to their television screens, trying to make sense of what the SCOTUS has said, the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Donald Trump, on the other hand, spoke to some gathered journalists around him. He said, it's a disgrace, and needless to say, I have plan B. What must be going on in the mind of Scott Bessent? What must be going on in the Trump administration right now? And how significant is this ruling in the first place, sir?
This is extremely significant, especially from the point of view of India, because the interim trade agreement, which India had more or less agreed to accept at 18% reciprocal tariffs, while agreeing to bring down its own tariffs to near zero for a host of industrial products as well as agricultural products which had not been exempted. I think this would be a huge relief, because that 18% itself is open to serious doubt. Despite President Trump's plan B. Now, what is plan B? There are 2 or 3 provisions which have been mentioned in this context. One is the Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, which has already been applied on steel, aluminium, auto, and auto component tariffs. Now, that is something which can only be invoked after an inquiry and, of course, to be carried out by US government officials. But it can only be invoked if there is a national interest involved, security interest. For instance, steel, aluminium, etc., are used in aircraft, jet aircraft, for fighter aircraft, tanks, all kinds of armaments, etc. Now, to impose the same kind of conditions on clothing, on gems and jewelry, on marine exports, etc., would be very far-fetched. And even if President Trump goes ahead and does it, it will also get struck down in the course of time. So that is one option. The second option is 301, which the US has used in the past also, about an unfair trade practice. Now, that also is not all that easy to impose, and it cannot be done across the board. So this 18% tariff on India is gone as of now, and a host of other nations which had buckled down to the bullying: the European Union at 15%, the UK at 10%, Japan at 15%, Korea at 15%. They all will breathe a sigh of relief. Canada, Mexico, the close allies of the US a few years ago, they all will be greatly relieved.
Yeah,